Let me know when you're ready to start the meeting again. Okay. Council meeting is now back in session. All right, again, is there William Donaldson? We're having public comment at this time for items that are not on the agenda.
Correct. William Donaldson, 8203 Park Avenue Southeast. Today we've been discussing infrastructural improvements to our city so that the flow of traffic can be improved and congestion relieved. These are important functions of government and most pressing use of public funds in these times of rapid growth and planning. Much of this traffic originates from throughout the region. Snoqualmie is very closely related to the longest interstate highway in the United States, and State 202 runs directly through our downtown area. Traffic congestion may not often be reflected in the value of our homes, but it does add stress to our days and deduct time otherwise spent with family. To address this traffic crisis, King County has, for most of my life, been concerned with the expanse of a vast rail system, one that would hopefully transform our unquestionably inadequate public transit system for the better. The South Transit Light Rail is scheduled for public service beginning in the year 2023. Its proponents hope it will encourage our people to embrace public transport, even though they may be able to afford personal automobiles and all of the costs associated with them. In 2018 alone, to my knowledge, the city of Snoqualmie has contributed some $154,000 to Puget Sound Transit construction projects. And under the current plans, it's not likely that this rail system will be connected to Snoqualmie in your lifetimes, perhaps not even in mine, if we should be fortunate enough to live out our expectancy. As a city, we're paying for infrastructure we cannot readily utilize. If our residents would like to use this new transport that they're paying for, we would have to drive to the already encumbered city of Issaquah, make use of their lots and their stops, straining their resources and their infrastructure. Given the cost of these systems, it's unlikely that we'll be able to fund a link to this far east in the near future. But we can at least provide far better connection for our people without being an encumbrance to our neighbors. We can do this by constructing a new Snoqualmie Transit Center. Many of us work in metropolitan areas to the west. It's likely that when this railroad is fully functioning, we'll be able to reduce or eliminate emissions and save time as we avoid interstate congestion, all by riding this railway. If we can, we should. I propose that we identify the ideal parcel and we inform King County that because we are directly and significantly funding the light rail, we need more adequate connection. That can begin with direct bus-to-train implementation via park and ride. This will reduce congestion at home, it will reduce emissions, it will provide parking, and it could very well save our residents the most valuable resource of all, their time. And I thank you for yours.
Thank you, William. Rebecca Bastian. We are.
Good evening, council, mayor, citizens. Anyway, my public comment this evening is just I want to offer my condolences to Wayne Russell and his family. And I also want to thank our citizens who have helped Wayne through his tough times and got him some of the help he needed and been there. We all come together. And I'm grateful. This is one of the reasons why I love living in this city. So I want to thank everybody involved in all that. And I also want to give kudos to our fire department and our police department because they work tirelessly to keep our community safe and our neighboring sisters. And anyway, thank you for this time. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate you recognizing Wayne's loss. Anna.
Anna Sotelo, 7117 Almond Avenue Southeast. So just spending more time downtown and just noticing a few observations. One, I guess I'm confused where our sign standards have gone. I notice a lot of signs using plastic, temporary plastic banners versus a real sign. Some that have been up for as long as 4 years and some that are new that I don't recall going through planning department. So with that said, I just believe that the Ridge pop-up businesses that have come and gone over the last 12 years would have really liked to have put up a $200 sign versus a $10,000 sign. So with that said, I just want something like that. Who's keeping track of those kind of things? The other is I volunteered at the Wine Walk, and it was I'd never been to one because I'd never been free on a Friday night. And it's a really neat, unique experience. But one thing I did notice is the boardwalk. There's some weeds in the cracks, and quite honestly, I think it's a merchant issue. I think that it's, I used to sweep a lot outside my place, but I think that there needs to be some kind of communication to really make that boardwalk look as special as it can. Also, spending more time at Sandy Cove Park and with the NLS doing the contract there, I noticed that a lot of the care of just the trash, and I'm not talking about the big dumpsters, which are a problem, I think that should be addressed, but just the little trash can as you go down just always seems to be overflowing, and just that perhaps they don't take the trash out before they mow the grass. And I think that we're losing a little bit of those extra touches by NLS handling those small things versus more of a seasonal employee. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else who didn't have a chance to sign up that would like to speak at this time? Monica, on an item that's not on the agenda. Thank you, William.
Hi, I would like to speak about the Hawk Light at Fisher Avenue. I would simply like to know if the city ever reviewed the plan that was presented to them last August that was proving that the Fisher Avenue intersection was not warranted for a Hawk traffic signal, and when the city will be considering putting a four-way traffic signal in at the Fisher Avenue Snoqualmie Parkway intersection, as contractually agreed to 12 years ago with the developer Quadrant, as well as the many $204,000 that was accepted to do exactly that. One of the concerns is if you are traveling on Fisher Avenue in either direction, there's zero signage. So if the Hawk is actually in effect and people are crossing on the parkway, the individuals at Fisher cannot see the Hawk on the parkway, nor are they given any instruction on what to do. There's no signage, which should be there. There should also be additional slow down and telling people what their speed is signage along both sides of the parkway, which when Pertite gave the recommendation of installing the Hawk signal, stated in their actual report that that had to happen if the Hawk was going to be put at the Fisher Avenue intersection. And they're still not there. They're in front of the new elementary school, but they're not there for children and residents that are crossing on the Hawk. Unfortunately, it does not alleviate any of the traffic problem. The residents still have a very difficult time merging onto the parkway in either direction. There is poor visibility, there's poor lighting, and it would be wonderful if the citizen-funded traffic study that residents provided to the city staff and to the council, if someone would please respond to us. We've still heard absolutely nothing, and we are still in need of a four-way traffic signal with 4 crosswalks like every other four-way intersection on the Snoqualmie Parkway has. And I would urge you to make sure that you receive WSDOT approval, as well as having that warrant met that so many people have to cross per hour before you consider installing any more hot crosswalks in the city of Snoqualmie, which I understand you're considering adding one on River Street, which could be dangerous. And once again, Mayor, we'd love to hear from you regarding that traffic study, because it was done by a certified traffic engineer with a lot of experience, and we would like a city response. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. Is there anybody else that didn't get a chance to sign up that would like to speak at this time? All right, seeing no one else come forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be enacted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the May 28, 2019 regular city council meeting. Approval of, other approvals include Agenda Bill 19055, interlocal agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the South King County Fire Consortium for fire staff training. Agenda Bill 19059, agreement with the State Recreation and Conservation Office for the Sandy Cove Park project. And Agenda Bill 19064, settlement and release of claims agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and Sam M. Hagan and Carrie L. Hagan. Do I have a motion, council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Mayhew.
Just want to get a question answered on Agenda Bill 19-064 in the staff report.
Not part of the consent agenda.
Yeah, 064 is,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
the Hagan,
See,
the
I'm putting
Hagan
my
settlement.
glasses on. I'm in trouble.
Keep going, Joe.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. Sorry.
Or lend him your glasses, one or the other.
In the analysis section of the staff report, there's a discussion of a cost estimate of $18,845. And then there's a discussion that the settlement amount is $13,600. And I'm guessing what happened, but I'm just not clear on this. Is it possible just to be clear why those two numbers are different?
During negotiations, the Haugans offered to perform a certain amount of the work in terms of removing the illegally installed paver path and I think irrigation associated with some of the plantings, and that to reduce the amount that they would pay the city. I think they also offered to install the plantings themselves, which was declined. And so the difference in the amount is the removal of the demo work from the total.
So then I'd be correct in believing that the settlement means that the city is not incurring any the city is not incurring any costs related to
pocket.
restoring this?
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, with the exception of that the city's arborist is going to supervise the work, just to make sure that it's.
A relatively de minimis amount, I assume.
Correct, not out-of-pocket cash expenditures.
Councilmember Hallway, did you still have a
No,
question?
he answered the question. Other
All
than
right.
that, he spent the minute.
Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? All right, with that, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these items prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we move on to the ordinances. Agenda Bill 19035, ordinance adopting plat procedures code amendment. And the summary statement was written in, so if you could just read the motion, this is ready for action tonight. Community Development Department.
That's me. 035?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Review procedure.
Just the motion.
Oh, just the motion. Move to adopt ordinance
1215.
adopting plat procedures code amendment.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 1215 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Chair of the committee, did you want to say anything before the staff read?
I did. Just to remind council of kind of I'm sorry, I just didn't see it. This is plat procedures, correct?
Correct.
Just to remind council members of kind of how we got to this moment. There was a first reading of this proposed ordinance, and following that, it was referred back to committee to address two questions from council members. The first question related to the level of involvement by the council at the plat approval stage in improving variances or imposing code interpretations or requirements not in existing law that the council might deem to be in the public interest. The second was a technical question related to how several code sections interacted. At committee, the salient points that came out were that the technical questions were answered by walking through the relevant code sections. Those questions don't remain. No changes been made. It was just walking through that. The proposed ordinance does not alter the existing role of the council in approving variances. So variance approval was assigned to hearing examiners long ago. And this proposal doesn't make any changes to that. The current role of the council in the plat approval process is limited to only quasi-judicial determinations, which means we have to make them within the constraints of existing code and state law. The council does not currently have discretion to interpret code or impose requirements outside of those constraints. So the proposed changes include moving those determinations to a hearing examiner who's bound by those same constraints but is better qualified to interpret them. It does clarify and standardize how hearing examiner decisions may be appealed to the council. The city planner will make a short presentation in more depth regarding variances and the legal constraints in the plat approval process and is here to answer any questions that, follow-on questions that we may have.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayhew. Jason Rogers with the Community Development Department. It's up so you can hear me. Councilmember Mayhew gave a great overview. I just wanted to touch on some of the historical information the committee has seen that is useful for the whole council. Stepping all the way back to 1991 is when the current subdivisions chapter was originally adopted. This is Ordinance 669, so you can see how old this is. In April 1995, the city adopted a new zoning code. This was its Growth Management Act compliant zoning code. Of note there, you'll see on the screen, it talks about who is responsible for approving different permits. So conditional use permits was decided by the Planning Commission back then. Variances were decided by the Planning Commission. And plan unit developments and the planned residential, planned commercial, industrial plans were the same as they are today. A Planning Commission public hearing and recommendation, and then a city council decision. Then in August 1996, the council adopted ordinances that established a hearing examiner. And so Ordinance 767 just established the office of the hearing examiner. It has a note, there's a section in that ordinance that specifically notes that preliminary plats are the domain of the hearing examiner, which is to say the hearing examiner holds the public hearing, makes recommendation, not the planning commission. This is important because there's a code provision that's still in Chapter 2, talking about the Planning Commission, and another one in in the subdivisions chapter that refers to the Planning Commission. That note in that ordinance would say that those provisions have no force. Why the code wasn't actually amended at that point is a different question. I would say at this point it's a cleanup, we're fixing it now. A companion ordinance, 769, went in and determined, so what's the hearing examiner here to do? So preliminary plats, conditional use permits, the planning commission's role was replaced by the hearing examiner. So all you did is you strike through planning commission, replace that with hearing examiner. Variances, we ended up with this complicated setup that Councilmember Mayhew was summarizing. Doesn't really affect the council's role here. And then the PUDs and the planned residential, planned commercial, industrial plans remain the same. That's the planning commission hearing, city council decision. Some further clarifications for the council is that these reviews we're talking about are all quasi-judicial land use decisions. So the appearance of fairness doctrine applies. The decision maker, whether it's the council or the staff or the hearing examiner or the planning commission, is applying the law as it's established by this council. So there's no room to step outside of the law and create new policy. This is all about applying the law to a specific site and facts. When you get to variances, variances allow a certain amount of leeway to step outside of generally, the general standards, but even that ability to step outside is set by the council. And so you have, and they're still quasi-judicial because you're applying a specific or you're applying the law to a specific set of facts on a specific site. It's, again, not a blanket, we can create a new policy. If you end up in a situation where, the example I've used before, is we don't grant use variances. So if a use is not allowed in the zone, you can't get a variance for that. The only way to do that is to come to the city council and get a zoning code text amendment to change the use table. That's purely a council decision. This plat procedures ordinance does not affect that at all. There's still no way to jump around and do things that are not otherwise allowed. Since 2000, the city has processed 8 variances. They've all been decided by the hearing examiner. One was for perimeter landscaping. 2 were for digital reader board signs that are at schools. 2 were for setbacks. 1 was for a freestanding sign downtown, which is actually not allowed, but you can get one through a variance for because they're allowed elsewhere. And 1 is actually for the crawl space for this building. And that was actually a variance from the flood code and not the zoning code. So the proposed change you heard about with the variance decision maker wouldn't have affected any variances. It's tied to who's deciding the preliminary plat. So it's not really a change to the variance decision process. I did know who makes decisions on variances in other cities, and you'll see no other city that I looked at uses the city council. They all use a hearing examiner, or in 2 cases, city staff. That's not being recommended here. I won't go through the hearing examiners generally, other than to say they are legal professionals. They are highly qualified for this work. They are appointed by the mayor with the council's concurrence. The council has to confirm the appointment. So the council certainly has a role in who the hearing examiner is and who our backup hearing examiners are. Specific to Snoqualmie's hearing examiner, this is established in chapter 2.14, and there's a whole list of restrictions there. It couldn't be one of you or me. That's against the city's code. There's a specific restriction on us attempting to influence the examiner, and so that's designed to avoid creating an issue with appearance of fairness. Let's see, getting to preliminary plats, one of the big issues here, and the question came up is how many potential projects are we talking about? And the answer is, at present, there are no large subdividable lots in the city. The sole exception is the Salish expansion proposal, which this council has discussed before. I would say the Salish project is a little bit outside of the normal because there's a development agreement and a master plan in place. You'll recall this council still needs to approve residential design standards for the Salish expansion, so they couldn't even submit an application now. It wouldn't go anywhere. We'd say, well, you don't have any, there's nothing to review it against. You need to go back and do this step first. Similarly, if the city were to annex any of the urban growth area that's currently unincorporated, historically, the council has also wanted master plans or mixed-use plans to go with that. Certainly that's an option. The council could also just annex it and let the regular process play out, but that's ultimately a separate discussion. That's a policy discussion for the council to have if somebody asks for annexation in the future. Speaking of annexations, they're not an issue here. There's a very specific process for annexations laid out in state law. This council has to decide them. There is no option for the council to say, hey, hearing examiner, go figure that out. And it's not a decision staff can make. If somebody asks for it, we have to bring it to you, period. And then finally, on SEPA, on SEPA determinations, this is a whole separate chapter of law. It's largely handled by staff, which is because that's the way the state law is set up. At the end of the day, SEPA is designed to provide you information. It's not going to say yes or no to a project. It's to say, here's all the impacts, all the potential mitigations, what do you want to do? There's some question about what has discretion. I won't go through this too much. So just to summarize all the changes we're talking about in this ordinance, short plats remain the same, category 2, which is a staff decision with a notice to neighbors, no public hearing. Preliminary plats would change from category 3 to 4. So that would change it from a city council decision to a hearing examiner decision. That permit would then be appealable to the city council if somebody took issue with it. Today, if somebody wants to appeal the council's decision, they need to sue the city in King County Superior Court and go through that whole process, which is quite an undertaking. Final plats would change from a hybrid category 1-3 to just a category 1, which is a staff decision. There would be an appeal to the hearing examiner available for that. And then all the variances would be category 4, which is a hearing examiner decision appealable to the council. So you'll see in your agenda bill, there is a committee recommended revised ordinance in there. The changes are highlighted so you can see them more clearly. What this ordinance does, what this modified ordinance does is it removes the number of lots that constitute a short plat amendment that the Planning Commission did not recommend, and the Community Development Committee concurred with that recommendation. So those are removed. There's also an addition that was pointed out by Councilmember Shepherd on section 16.04.230, and this is the subdivisions in the mixed-use district. We inadvertently missed a reference to the Planning Commission needing to review plats, so we pulled that in and made the change to say hearing examiner in there. So those are the two big changes you'll see in the ordinance. And I can certainly take any questions.
Any other questions, Council? Councilmember Shepherd?
So if we do the preliminary plat and you have your hearing examiner as the first place of yea or nay, and then you can appeal to the council, yea or nay, can it then go to the Superior Court after that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions, asking if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on this ordinance prior to action. All right, seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
All right, motion carries 6-1. All right, with that, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 19061, ordinance, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, no, ordinance Shoreline Master Program update. This was introduced on the 10th and was,
No, we pulled this from the
I
agenda.
think we referred it to committee.
That's why we
no,
called.
no, the
No,
action
no.
was, go ahead, Councilmember Holloway.
God, if I can remember it right. Because.
Motion was to pull the public hearing, and then you
Right,
said no.
to pull the
and-
public hearing, we have to do a separate.
And you were going
motion
to take
for the
action,
agenda.
we got to this to pull this item, so.
So, community development, go ahead and let's just make a motion to take it back to committee.
Move to refer this agenda bill to Community Development Committee for further consideration.
Second.
Okay, motion.
Echo.
Motion and a second to send Agenda Bill 19061 back to committee. Any further discussion? Councilmember Holloway.
I get point of order. We did set some expectations of public comment.
All right,
Can we take public comment?
it was still
before
on
we-
the agenda, and that's why I had to follow the protocol I did, but if the council would like to indulge that, I'm not sure I want to reward the behavior at this point, but if they want to indulge that, I can certainly do that. Okay. Is there anybody that would like to comment on this item, even though it's going back to committee? Monica?
To be fair.
Thank you, council. Regarding the Shoreline Master Plan, Matt Lassay was correct. In 2017, there were several public meetings. Council member Peggy Shepherd attended those meetings, and so did Matt Lassay. There was extensive discussion regarding the Shoreline Master Plans and problems with Bourse Lake. So for those of you who weren't involved in those discussions or on council at that time, I'd simply like to give you a little information regarding Bourse Lake. And our late mayor and council member Charles was very vocal, since he worked for Weyerhaeuser, about what was dumped into that lake for decades. And it was PCB oil from the transformers that generated electricity for the mill site. There were multiple chemicals, including cooling agents, possible toxic coal dust, and some that worked there even said possible bodies of people who passed away at the site early on. This lake has just been well-known within the community to be extremely contaminated, and I find it very hypocritical of the city to allow Mark Hoffman in 2016 to state that there is a determination of non-significance to test the lake. So it is the city that is not allowing us to test the lake. However, they would like to put in the Shoreline Master Plan that it could be used for recreational uses. I do have an environmental background, and I can tell you PCBs are cancer-causing. The exposure limits on children is horrendous. The levels of exposure on children is much greater than on an adult, and testing can be done at this lake. So I would like to see that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Was that 3 minutes?
That's 2 minutes
Oh, we only get 2 minutes. I thought it
during,
was 3.
during agenda items, yes. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on that item on the shorelines plan? All right, and I'm sorry, council, those comments were so inflammatory and outrageous. I do have to say that Charles would be spinning his grave. He never said there were PCBs or bodies or other such things dumped in that lake, to my recollection.
Charles said that, I said things.
And it's pure hearsay. If there was evidence presented in those, there was a fire where,
What point of our, Mayor, we're not supposed to respond to public comment?
all right.
I got one in on you.
Point of order sustained. We'll move on. Finance Administration
I'm
Committee.
usually the one.
There's a motion on the table to refer to committee.
Oh, thank you, Councilor Merlissy. Okay. Oh, no, we did,
No,
we
took
motioned
public.
in
We have a
second.
motion and a second. We need to vote to refer it back to committee.
all right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 19057, ordinance amending Chapter 2.90 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code delegating authority to sign certain minor contracts and emergency contracts without prior city council approval, adopting a comprehensive purchasing, professional services, and public works contract matrix, and providing for severability and an effective date. Was introduced on the 28th of May and is ready for action tonight.
Yeah, but due to some consideration discussions in F&A, I would like to postpone action and actually move this, refer back to committee.
Second?
Motion and a second to refer back to committee made by Councilman Holloway. Any discussion, council? Councilman Sunwell?
So I'm curious, I thought a lot of progress had been made on this. Is there, what am I missing? That there wasn't a lot of progress made?
There's a lot of progress made.
Just more to go. Okay.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Warrants?
No, we're still under ordinances here.
Oh, you're right.
So coming up to Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 19063. There was a request for an executive session prior to this item, so at this time, we're going to basically head up to an executive session. We'll use the conference room upstairs. So if council could do that real quickly. Councilor Mayhew, you're the one raising the concern. I anticipate, 10 minutes maybe, or?
Yes,
Okay, or 5 or 10 minutes.
yes.
Everybody else is welcome to get comfortable. Regular council meeting is back in session. Agenda Bill 19063, Third Amendment to Comprehensive Garbage, Recyclables, and Compostables Collection Agreement with the Waste Management of Washington Incorporated.
I would like to revise the summary statement to be as follow. The city would like to amend the current contract eliminating bagged plastic bags, as an acceptable item in the recycle collection per letter of understanding from Waste Management. Okay?
Second.
What? Move to approve Third Amendment to Comprehensive Garbage Recycle Compostable Collectible Agreement with Waste Management of Washington Incorporated and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19063 as stated by Councilmember Holloway.
I would like to add a subsidiary movement to remove all exhibits with the exception of the Third Amendment to the Garbage Recycle Composting Contract. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to remove items as stated by Councilmember Holloway. We're on the amendment to the motion. I got a little dinosaur motion in there, so to that one, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, back to the original motion as amended by,
So, and again,
and Councilmember Holloway, I'm going to ask if there's members of the public that want to comment
Okay.
on that prior to action. Anyone on this item? All right, seeing no one move forward, go ahead.
well, other than, this is really for clarification, limit this, plastic bags are a high expense now for waste, for recycle, so we'd like to take it out of the stream to try and contain costs. And that's what this motion is for.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I have a question about, can these bags go into the garbage?
You have two options. You can still recycle them. You can take them to your local grocery store. I understand from firsthand experience that Safeway does recycle these bags.
So does Fred Meyer and QFC. I checked.
Yes.
Emily, go ahead and get up there in case there's questions that you. I'm sorry, Councilman Lissay, go ahead.
I was just adding that, the similar question, but that also QFC and Fred Meyer will accept bags also.
It would be bag leakage from the city.
Councilmember Holloway?
Never mind, I was cracking a joke, I'm sorry.
Any further discussion or questions of Emily's your waste management representative, if you don't know? Councilmember Shepherd.
So as far as containers that are more tamper-resistant for bears, what do you guys have?
Point of order.
Go ahead.
I love bears, but unless bears are putting plastic bags in our recycle bin, it has
Sustained,
nothing
it's
to
not
do
relevant
with
to the
what-
agenda bill. Councilmember Shepherd, if you could, is there another question you want to ask?
Well, the reason I'm asking.
Relevant to the agenda bill.
The reason that I'm asking is because I understand that anytime we make a change to a contract, there's an opportunity to negotiate terms. Is that right?
I'm still not understanding the nexus between the bears and the minor modification of the contract here pertaining to plastic bags.
Well, it seems to me that if we're making a change in one place, maybe there's an opportunity to get something to move forward as far as getting more bear tamper resistant.
So are you suggesting adding additional amendments to this motion tonight?
Yeah.
So there was discussion, and staff
Councilmember
did have
Holloway.
discussions of give and takes on the contract in regards to removal of plastic bags. However, it was felt, one, this is a cost containment, not a reduction in cost, and two, just as in terms of ecology, this is a good thing to do. So we forego trying to push for any concessions in regards to this.
So I just wanted to bring that up as an option.
Okay. I would just note real quickly that the item that you raised is a far more costly one that would be far more impactful to a negotiation than simply the plastic bag issue. So that would be far more complicated, and I would recommend that that be brought under a separate motion or discussion from the committee.
What's the penalty if they're not conforming?
I'm sorry, penalty for what?
If people continue to do what should, I think is normal.
Of
that
a
people-
homeowner?
Yeah, yeah.
And putting plastic bags in the recycling cart,
Right.
the tag will, or the cart will be tagged by the driver as not acceptable, because it has contamination. To Councilmember Holloway's point, this is a cost containment issue, but it also, removing black bags from the recycling waste stream is actually paramount to keeping recycling viable as a whole, and trying to just really put into carts the items that that are truly actually recyclable. And taking bags to grocery stores is the highest and best use way to recycle those materials.
And how are we going to make people conscious of, how are we going to publicize that? How's that going to work?
It'll be out we send out annual guides every year to all residents and businesses, and we will have supplemental information at all the mini summer events that we will be attending with our education booth, and interns who do outreach in the city of Snoqualmie during the summer.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Sumwall.
I should add, I found this out myself about a month ago, that the blue cans, at least my blue can, already says they're not allowed. So I don't know if that's just a stamp you put on all the cans, because some cities say that and some don't, but it already says it on my blue can that you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, and
So-
that was, it's not really accepted in a lot of municipalities. Actually, King County as a whole, a lot of cities support removing of that. So you probably got a decal from another city, not
You got
not
a
a Snoqualmie.
recycle can.
You got a, you're ahead of the curve.
I always assumed they weren't allowed, but.
Yeah. So.
Any further discussion or questions, council? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee? Are there any other items?
I'd like to move forward on the warrants as presented in the agenda item.
And the
The
warrants
answer to
under
your
FMA.
question, Mayor, is no further action or report.
Thank you, Councilmember Sumwall. All right, Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 19050, 2019 Commercial Compost Program Consultant Services Agreement with Waste Management of Washington.
In the 2019-2020 budget, up to $15,000 was approved in Environmental Sustainability Fund 15 for a commercial compost outreach program. This agreement with Waste Management provides the anticipated program within budget. Move to approve the 2019 Commercial Compost Program Consultant Services Agreement with Waste Management of Washington, Inc., and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19050, stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, any discussion, council, or would the chair of the committee want to make any comments on this item prior to discussion? Okay. Councilmember Ross and Councilmember Shepherd.
So it looks like it's an educational program to get at least 15 businesses involved, but yet there's 26 businesses. And so I'm curious, why are we limiting it to only 15 when there's potentially more that we can?
Right,
do?
right. So there's 26 viable businesses that have a food-centered sort of program or service that they provide. As you know, usually when you do an outreach program, you can try to encourage a lot of people to enroll. That usually isn't 100% successful on the first go. So this anticipates a probable number of businesses we anticipate will enroll as of following the program. And then the budget is also designed around aiding those 15 businesses in establishing the program, including with Slim Jims or basically in-kitchen materials for compost collection, as well as some guidance on compostable packaging and bag liners that businesses may not be as familiar with since they'll be starting this program anew.
So if there's 17 businesses that want to do this, can you do 17 businesses then, or is it still limited to 15?
It would depend on the services they want. If they want some of the in-house materials like Slim Jims for the kitchens and so forth, we could use some of the contingency funds for that. But it really kind of depends on their needs.
So $1,000 per business, $1,000 per business, right? So
that's the anticipated cost with staffing and the materials, yes.
And they don't pay for it?
There's a fee, I think it's $45 a month to enroll. Okay.
And then I guess also, let's keep going. So then it reduces the amount of garbage that they have, correct? So will they see a decrease in their monthly fee for garbage?
It depends on their collection system. If they have sort of the large waste, collection, they probably, I don't know if they can downsize that, but the standard way that they can capitalize on that change is by reducing the size of the container, the garbage collection container.
Which would most often be the case when there's a limited, like bricked-in storage or waste disposal area, say in the parking lot behind a restaurant, and there's only so much space, they're going to have to reduce the waste container in order to make a larger compostable container. So, yeah, they would have a reduced cost on the waste.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd?
So where have they implemented this program before?
So I was talking with Heather Scholes. She's the individual that likely will lead the program with us. They've been doing it throughout multiple areas of Seattle. That's been their focus. And then I know that I believe Heather is also active in Duval with different types of outreach programs, though really the commercial compost so far has really been piloted, I believe, throughout Seattle.
So it seems like this should end up in a net savings, I would think, for restaurants.
Depending on how they go about it, yes, that's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as, I know that sometimes you don't anticipate some impacts, is there any concern about odor or anything like that with this program?
Well, so there's different methods that businesses can use to control odor, such as mixing the type of materials, like adding newspaper, paper goods, things like that. That can sometimes help. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. I don't know if.
I oftentimes say we're collecting the food waste already, it's just going in a different container. So, and the frequency of collection would be established based on the volume that's being generated, so.
But they can't go into plastic bags, right?
And the compost, actually, it's preferable if it goes into compostable liners. So to Nicole's point, a large part of the technical assistance in working with the businesses would be educating them on finding the liners that are approved by the processing facility. And so.
And so you work with, like, if there's a cluster of businesses that all use the same refuse area, you work up with those groupings of businesses? Is that how you do it? Or?
I believe I don't want to speak for Hannah and Nicole, but you're really going to work closely with the food waste generating businesses. So if there's a bunch of food waste generating businesses that share a particular service area, I think that would be a win-win. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, in terms of helping them divert the material from the garbage dumpster until the food waste container.
Do we target the people who have the most waste? Is that something we do, or no?
So the commercial compost program is targeting businesses that tend to be food service oriented. So in that sense of that slate, yes, we are.
Okay.
But but like, for instance, the school would be a large food generator, and we're not necessarily going to try and tackle the schools with this one because that's a different type of program and outreach that would likely be needed. So, but yes, the largest food generating private businesses will be targeted with this program.
Thanks.
All right, if there's no further questions or discussion, council, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. There was an item of, Mark, are you ready to give an update on the EIS for the mill site as requested in our Community Development Committee? Did I capture that correctly, whoever requested that? Okay.
Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. Very briefly, yes. The reason being, this is quasi-judicial. In late 2017, they submitted the PCI master plan, spent the better part of last year and into this year preparing a preliminary draft. We're reviewing that right now. It's a deliberative draft. And, sir?
PCI.
Planned Commercial Industrial, which is the land use for the site. Thank you, Akron. So that said, what it's leading to is when the city's third-party independent consultants gather their initial comments to see what we've been given, that will lead to a draft EIS that we will circulate for public and agency comment. We're not at that point yet, and I'd prefer not to speak beyond that on that matter.
Great. Councilmember Sewell?
Do you have a quarter in which you think that that process will be completed and a draft will be presented to the public?
I'll know more as we get into the third week of June.
Okay.
A better idea of the potential timeline.
All right.
Okay,
Councilman
and
Ross?
Do we have the plan, or we don't have it? Or they're still working on it and they're going to
We
submit
have
it?
what's called a preliminary draft.
You do, okay.
Yeah.
So the application is for a PCI plan. We have their proposed plan. What Mr. Hoffman is speaking about is a preliminary working document that could lead to his issuance of a draft environmental impact statement. And that, to get to that next step, requires his review, outside consultant review, back and forth, potentially revisions, and that's the timeline that he says right now is uncertain.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any other report for Community Development Committee?
No further report.
Finance Administration Committee, moving back to warrants.
Move to approve the warrants as documented in the agenda.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the warrants as presented. Councilor, or first of all, is there any member of the public that has any concerns or comments about the warrants prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, Councilmember Shepherd.
So I am pulling the warrants off because I'm not getting answers that are over a year old. And that's why I pull the warrants, just to remind everyone that we're not getting answers to questions when we look at warrants.
Point of information, I thought your issue was in regards to questions you had back in March. The committee asked you to restate those because committee was not tracking which ones were answered, which ones were not answered. Is that true?
You got two questions re-asked after they'd been asked like 3 or 4 times. And I did get a response that said that they can't answer the oldest one, and then the next oldest one, I haven't heard anything from that since.
What are the warrant numbers in question?
I don't have actually, there's a whole list of them.
Agreed, your list in March at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 warrants in regards to it. And
The park refund warrants, there's more than 10, I don't remember, a dozen or more.
Okay, so I'm not sure how we're going to get out of this unless we can state which warrants you
I can
feel are unanswered.
I can
That
send
has
it
been a
again.
request of you.
I've sent it 3 times at least. So I can send it again.
Please send it again.
Okay.
I can't remember that I received those 3 questions. Okay.
Councilman Mayhew.
Yes, I'm just curious if the finance director could clarify, do these warrants include payroll for our staff?
No.
This last batch would have had payroll in it, yes.
Yeah.
So the notion that I'm hearing is that we're not going to pay our staff because some questions from a year ago weren't answered? Is that the notion I'm hearing? Because I don't understand that. I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Any further discussion, council? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
Motion is carried 6-1. All right, Agenda Bill 19065, Collective Bargaining Agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Snoqualmie Police Association, 2019-2021 contract.
Pursuant to 35A 11020 RCW, the City of Snoqualmie is authorized to contract and be contracted with, by, and through the City Council acting as the city's legislative body. It would promote efficiency in government for the City Council to amend the Snoqualmie Municipal Code provisions pertaining to purchasing and contracting. Wait a minute, no, I'm sorry, back up. Wrong one. We pulled that one.
Is it this one? No, 6-5?
It's been quite the evening.
Don't make the chief angry now.
The city and the Snoqualmie Police Association have negotiated terms and conditions for a successor collective bargaining agreement, CBA, pending council approval. Move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and Snoqualmie Police Association 2019 through 2021 and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second?
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19065 as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward. Any discussion or questions, council? All right, seeing no further discussion or questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried, approved unanimously. Any further report for Finance Administration Committee?
No further report.
Public Safety Committee, Agenda Bill 19062, fireworks stand permit for American Promotional Events Incorporated Northwest.
American Promotional Events, Inc., Northwest, has applied for a fireworks stand permit with the stand to be located in the new Safeway parking lot from June 29th, 2019 to July 4th, 2019. American Promotion Events, Inc., Northwest, has complied with all submission requirements. Move to approve the American Promotional Events, Inc., Northwest fireworks stand permit.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19062 as stated by Councilmember Ross. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward. Any further discussion or questions? Councilmember Ross?
So this was, this is the first time that this vendor's applied for a permit, and we already complied with all the requirements, it states that. We did not put this on the consent agenda because from Public Safety, 2 of us approved to send it forward, and 1 voted against. And so that's why it's on non-consent. Our fire department will inspect the stand to ensure compliance.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
So my concern is that we're hearing more about climate change and concerns about fire safety. And this will be a second fireworks stand in the city. And I think that we need to consider a ban on fireworks in our city, period. And I'm not in favor of adding another fireworks stand as far as sales. We've already approved the other one, and I don't think that we can do anything about that, but I think.
So actually, Councilmember Shepherd, before one of the council members does, I'm going to rule that the comments aren't pertinent to the agenda bill. The whole question or issue of whether we want to do a ban or not isn't relevant to this. This is really a question of someone's coming forward asking for a permit for their stand, and does the council approve or not approve whether it complies with our current rules and regulations around fireworks? So I think the question to you as a council member, I understand your reservations about whether we should continue doing fireworks is under current rules and regulations and ordinances, does this request comply with our rules and regulations?
And I guess what I would say to that is that I think that we also, if we had one on every block, I think we'd have to stop it. So I don't think that we can just approve numerous stands to sell fireworks. I think that this is not a black and white situation. I don't agree with having an additional stand to sell fireworks.
All right, any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
All right, motion carried 5-2. All right, any other reports for Public Safety Committee?
Yes, speaking of fireworks, as we get closer to July 4th, our fire department communications manager will start pushing out information to the community regarding approved fireworks and safety. So.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, we'll move on. Jody, am I missing any other items, or are we ready for Committee of the Whole? We have a few items there.
Ready for Committee of the Whole. We have 2 topics.
All right, we'll just start queuing up some of the topics if you can.
We've got citizen topic.
I have a question.
Sure, be out of here by 9.
All right, so the first topic under Committee of the Whole is the, before we do, there was a request, Councilmember Ross, out of the Public Safety Committee, if maybe we could ask for a report on the fire, on the house fire, just a quick briefing.
I'll turn it over to our expert.
He is an expert.
And putting out fires.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Carrera, Fire Chief. Yeah, so as you all know, we had a pretty significant incident on Friday. This is the second fire at that residence. The last one was on August 4th of last year. Another tragic event happened then as well. So right now, I haven't talked to the investigator today, but when he left the scene, they were not concerned about it being an arson-related incident, and they were going to be working with the insurance provider to do the investigation. And once we get an official determination from them, I'll certainly share that, but it's a little bit premature right now. You guys all saw the pictures online. Basically, that was a house that was under construction of a craftsman-style home, post and beam with hand-pegged wood into it. Very custom-style house that didn't have windows on it. It didn't have a roof on it. And when the fire got burning into it, something like that is basically like a large campfire, and it's just going to burn out of control. We got there as quick as we could, as soon as we got the calls, and I'll have a more in-depth, detailed report for the Public Safety Committee next week, once we compile all the information. But we got there, and the first water streams that the firefighters had to spray was on the neighboring houses, because the fire was impinging on those, and we were worried about both of the houses on each side getting going. So fortunately, we had 4 people on duty. One of our volunteers was on duty that night that was also a firefighter. So it allowed us to actually stretch 2 lines, one to the house on the right side, and then the other line went to the house on the left side. And when Falls City pulled up, they started staffing that line to cool off the buildings. About an hour or so later, the fire was totally extinguished, and the investigator was there and started his investigation. Fortunately, obviously, nobody was home because it was under construction, and no civilians were injured. 2 firefighters were hurt at that incident. They appear to be somewhat minor injuries. They were working for mutual aid companies that were responding in to help us on that incident. So again, as soon as I get more information, and I've asked Deputy Chief Bailey to provide a more in-depth report for public safety next week.
I think there were 4 of you, including you, that responded, 4 cities, right? Bellevue, Eastside Fire and Rescue, Falls City.
Falls City, Snoqualmie. And we had we're part of a East Side Hazardous Materials Consortium that we pay into. And one of the things that they've been trying out over the last few months is actually having the hazmat team respond to these incidents, so they can handle air monitoring and they can actually handle the decontamination of the firefighters. So we did have that resource there as well, which responded from Woodinville. So that's where they came from.
Councilmember Sunwall, Councilmember Shepherd, and then Lissay.
So, about 10 months ago, I congratulated your fire department on doing such a fantastic job on that home. Sadly, I'm doing that again.
No.
Tired of seeing you guys there at that late hour. But again, I just want to, it's hard to articulate. This fire was way worse than the last one, in terms of the amount of engulfment and the fact that other homes on each side were in danger. And simply the heat that was generated from that this year was unbelievable. So it's very easy to take for granted what you guys do and the risk you guys put yourselves at, as was demonstrated with 2 firefighters. And so as a council member and a citizen and someone who had a vested interest in that fire, I just want to thank you guys and your team. I know you got that night off, but Captain Bailey.
Deputy Chief Bailey, yeah.
Yeah, Deputy Chief Bailey. He did great, by the way, so I hope you know that. But and I guess I will also tell you that, and I don't even know if you know this, but investigations will begin tomorrow at 9 o'clock from at least one of the insurance companies, and I believe the King County Sheriff guy will be there as well. So hoping to find a resolution on that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you. I'll certainly pass it along to the firefighters as well, and I'll make a point of stopping by tomorrow just to see if I can catch up with them.
Councilmember Shepherd?
So one of the things that I thought was interesting when this house caught fire the first time is that we saw pictures of the firefighters trying to peel off this metal roof and trying to get access to the flames because they couldn't get the water down to the source of the flames. And thinking about here we are again with the same house and possibly a metal roof again. And I know that we had 40 people that showed up at least, and 2 were injured. I was Googling to find out, what is the potential of fire with a metal roof? And in theory, it wouldn't, be easy to have a fire start at the top of the metal, but once it starts underneath, then it's really hard to penetrate and fight. And so I got to a fire engineering site, and they were talking about their recommendation is the only way that anyone should try to approach that kind of fire was with something over the building.
All right, I think for the sake of time, Council, I just wanted a quick report on the fire chief. I think you did a great job. I think we want to delve into this issue further. Perhaps we should send it back to the Public Safety Committee for further discussion if we could.
Well, I would like to ask, is there anything that we could have had or any equipment that would have made it safer for those two firefighters?
That's a great question for the Public Safety Committee. Thank you, Chief.
We'll take that up there.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chief. Yeah. Councilmember Lissay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Refresh my memory. Did we vote on this item? Oh, we did. We were just, that's right. We were at committee of the whole and just went back for a report on that fire for quickly. All right.
Second.
We had two items for committee of the whole. One was on the, Councilmember Mayhew, you said something about a mysterious citizen topic that you wanted to address, if you could.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just bring up with the rest of the council, committee of the whole. So as you all know, we sometimes get contacted by citizens with items they're hoping that the council will take up. And to my knowledge, we don't really have a process for sort of systematically deciding if we're going to take those up and referring to a committee and so on. And so there's one email that we all received over the last 2 weeks in particular where one citizen had brought up two specific items. And so I just wanted to talk about it. You know, often these are items that potentially could go on a list in a committee, but we wouldn't get to them for some time, but at least they'd sort of be in, I mean, I think most of the committees have, I don't know if they're parking lots is the right term, but sort of, yeah, docket items that are intend to get to at some point. And so I'm just wondering, should we, move items like that onto those kind of lists? And if so, it might make sense to do that with the two items that this citizen brought up, or is there some other way we'd rather handle that? So just wanted to bring that up for discussion.
Councilmember Sunwell?
So the way I've handled it, and I presume everyone else has handled it, is unless generally my experience has been they haven't been very policy related. It's the light bulb is out or the toilet at my bathroom, not my bathroom, but the park bathroom, is busted, and I'll just shoot those to the appropriate staff member. One of the things that we're going to talk about, I don't think we're quite prepared to talk about it yet, but one of the things we're proposing is that once a month that we would be available here prior to a city council meeting to just field kind of random stuff, right? And hopefully staff could participate in that as well, so you create this sort of environment where, since we don't have that back and forth in this setting, we could do that. Now, again, that requires somebody to come to the meeting, which we're not very successful at getting people to do. But I don't know, from a policy level perspective, I think that's interesting because I haven't had a lot of those questions, and I don't know if these are policy related.
Councilmember Mayhew?
Yeah, so
Councilmember Shepherd, our hand up. We'll come back to you.
I have no idea what questions we're talking about.
Yeah, the reason I wasn't trying to be mysterious there, I just didn't want to jump the gun. I agree, a lot of things we see are more just something really, we almost refer to staff and try and make sure they sort of follow up on. But these two items struck me as very much policy items. This person asked questions about lighting at Jeannie Hansen. This is a topic we're all aware of. Some people are for it, some people are against it. I think there's a belief that at some point that will get taken up, probably in Parks and Public Works, but I think there's a bunch of things really urgent in front of that. So I don't think that's soon, but it seems like a valid sort of policy type issue that we might want to put onto a docket. And then the other one the other question the same person brought up had to do with dog parks and potentially expanding the dog parks that are in the city. Again, seems like a policy type discussion to me. And so that's what I wanted to bring up. I hate to see it just sort of die in an email. And that's why I want to bring up, should we try and docket these kind of things, or what should we do? And I just want to point out, there are some citizens frustrated with their issues right now who believe that the council just was stonewalling them when they brought these items to us. My knowledge of how those items were brought to us were in a way that never really registered on us to get them onto a committee docket. So I think the citizens' perception in that case is very different than what I think our perception is. So it just seems to me there's something that maybe we could tweak here to make work a little better.
Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember Sunwell.
So we have a standard agenda for each committee, and at the end of that agenda is pending items. And it is the option of any of the sitting committee members to suggest something for the pending items and put it on there, and for the committee then to talk it as they get to it. There may be, I'll use the word, a hygiene issue here, that we may need to be a little more sensitive and start fielding amongst us to say, hey, Sean, these look like park things. Can you put them on the pending list for Parks and Public Works? And maybe be a little more responsive to the public. But there's a mechanism and a place for this kind of stuff, and that's the pending items on the agenda for the committee.
Brendan, how do we get the, oh, sorry.
No, well, responding back to that person then, I mean, once it may go to the committee and you may say, oh, we're not working on it right now, but you probably still want to respond back to that person and state that we're not working on the Jeannie Hansen lights.
Councilor Sumble.
So actually, now that you mentioned, I want to say there was at least one that was brought to my attention. This was very early in my tenure as city council person, was a noise ordinance. So I had one person who had done a lot of research on it. You could tell, you really wanted to honor the fact that they had put that effort into it. And so I met with the police chief. In fact, this is when I was on the Public Safety Committee. And, we debated it for a long time. I think we even talked about it here in council, and I think we ultimately resolved to do nothing, which is a fine outcome, right? But the point was, at the time, I was on a committee that belonged to. If that had come to me, I think the way it should work is if that had come to me and I wasn't maybe on the right committee for that, so in that case, I would have passed it off to Peggy or you, whoever was on that committee, and said, hey, here's the email. I've responded. Can you maybe take it up and engage? And I think that's where we have an opportunity, I think, amongst us. Yeah. Because we're the ones that are going to drive policy. It's not department heads, right? And so policies like that, I think we have to take it up. And with the understanding, of course, that these are very, very part-time jobs and there's only so much we can take on. But especially when we see people go to such an effort to do something, to at least have the conversation about it. And if that bubbles up to council, great. If it results in a change of something, great. If it doesn't, at least we've acknowledged it, we've talked about it. So I think that is sort of the informal way of passing it off to the appropriate head of a committee.
Councilmember Jeans.
So Jim, thanks for bringing this up. Over the course of 14 years, there have been people who have written very well thought out kinds of matters, and they address it to the whole council. So they're not looking to me for an answer, and I don't really want to get engaged in a debate with that individual, but I want to do something, and I've never had this brought to the front. I think it's a great idea. We want to find some way to just get it to the committee. Rather than respond to the person, get it to the point where we can talk about it and then get it back to the public.
Councilmember Sumble.
So I think we're actually all starting hitting the same thing. So an example where something is sent to all of us, Bob, I think so sometimes this tendency is when something's sent to all of us, we assume somebody else is doing something with it.
Someone else did it.
So, but what I think we should all do is, say it's something, let's say it was this noise ordinance thing, right? And we all got it. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to not assume anything. And maybe I'm not the person to engage on it, but I forward it to Catherine, for example, and CC this citizen, right? And basically pass the buck off to Catherine to then take that into committee, and then if it bubbles up, right? But I think there is that, and this is in every organization, the tendency is to do nothing because everyone's on it, so everyone's assuming somebody else is doing something on it, right? So I think we have an opportunity potentially for improvement on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers.
Well, it does a lot. I think I'm bothered by this thing that fell through the cracks, that there are now citizens saying, council member and naming different ones of us, including me, and saying, you didn't do anything with this. And I'm scratching my head thinking, well, but it never came up. And then I'm like, well, you know what? That means there's an expectation that I should have done something. And so I'm thinking, geez, we don't have a method for me to do something. That's sort of, maybe what I'm sort of hearing is let's try and do better at funneling things to committee chairs, and maybe that's fine. In which case, here, Parks and Public Works, hand it to you. That's Mr. Martinez.
You are Mr. Paper tonight.
Do you want to revise your suggestions?
Oh, there it is.
All right, if there's no further on that one item, we'll move on to the ad hoc committee on citizen engagement. Councilmember Jeans, were you going to cue that up, that issue?
Yeah, we never knew what to call ourselves, so we called ourselves the ad hoc. And it's all about public engagement. We had a formal presentation by a master's in these kinds of things, so we now have a formal document. So we're on the right track. We have an objective to look into these things. We ought to be more engaging. We ought to not let things slip through the cracks, and Jim just brought that kind of thing up. So this ad hoc is no more. It ought to be the Public Engagement Committee. So we would like to characterize ourselves as a Public Engagement Committee. When last we met, you, the council, asked the Public Engagement Committee to say, go back and talk and decide what you're all about. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? What is your, well, we sat down and we made a goal out of it. And so we're ready to identify the goal the council seeks public and input or engagement to assist in making difficult decisions for the committee. Actually, it should be decisions for the council for the city. In essence, we have something to do, and we will focus on creating a better public engagement. We've done these town hall meetings. I will say that we've done two. We have certainly engaged the public more than we have in a long time in very constructive ways. And so that's really all that you asked us as a committee to do, is to come up with a goal or come up with a reason for being. And so I'll submit to you that we will seek input and engagement to assist us in making difficult decisions.
So
Councilmember Hallway.
are you recommending, so ad hoc was really a term used to imply that this was a time-limited activity. Are you now suggesting that this be a standing committee?
I don't know, hadn't discussed that, hadn't thought about it. I was thinking this was an objective for this year. This committee would likely go through the end of this year, and we ought to take another look at it towards the end of the year. I have talked to our committee about that, but.
Councilmember Summerall.
Yeah, I would say, I don't really care what we call it. Ad hoc's fine for me for now. I think ad hoc is as we kind of mumbled over here, it means temporary. And I think the idea is that we're trying to create, we're trying to enhance our culture on council to look for additional opportunities for public involvement and public engagement. And after some period of time of kind of institutionalizing that, I think you hopefully reach a point where you don't even necessarily need a committee to do it, right? But I think our job is to come up with new, ingenuitive ways, constructive ways to do that, kind of for however long that takes, it's months or the rest of the year or a year from now, I don't know. But with the hope that it's not something that necessarily has to continue, because this becomes part of our culture and what we do.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the things that I'd like to see improve is a public engagement policy around our comprehensive plan process. And I'd like to have it so that whenever we do have a meeting, a public meeting, that we grade ourselves as far as how did we do? Because I think as all of our lives get busier, I think it gets tougher for people to make the time to get engaged. And I think at the end of the day, they're going to want to know that they knew about some significant changes happening in their community. And I think that we need to work harder to try to bring people to meetings or participate on some level. I've looked at some of the minutes for public hearings when no one showed up. And I don't know if that even should be qualified as having held a public hearing if no one shows up. Now, I realize you can't force somebody to come. However, I know that sometimes we've had meetings when it's during the holiday time, or there was very short notice, or we didn't do the letters, or whatever it is. I know that our paper isn't perfect, and it's just going to take some extra effort and thought for us to get more citizens engaged on giving us input that's useful, actionable input. So I would like to see us work toward doing something beyond what we do so far.
Councilmember Jeans.
Councilmember Sunwald sort of tweaked the subject of when this committee met, we got past this thing pretty quickly, and so we just kept talking about maybe different ways that we could work together. And those of you, both citizens and council members, who participated in something that was called Coffee with the Council that we had at the community center, and it was very informal. It was kind of short. It was, if you had a question, something that you wanted to talk about, go down and sit down with the council. Council members just kind of wandered around or mingled around, and we engaged in some pretty nice conversations. There seemed to be something came out of that. And so along those lines, what Sean was talking about, we were thinking about once a month before the council meeting. We would be available here at 6:15 and go till just about 7. And no agenda, just whatever anybody pops in off the street and wants to talk about. We will not be sitting here, we'll just be out talking to people with whatever they want to talk about. And as an opportunity for public engagement to talk about things people want to talk about. The sort of thing that happened at the beginning of this meeting would probably be accommodated by that thing. And some of the frustrations that citizens have had, especially those who come to the meetings regularly and are frustrated by 2 minutes or 3 minutes to express themselves, would have an opportunity to talk one-on-one with council members. And so what do you think about that idea?
Councilmember Holloway.
So, I think you've nailed it on the head, with the exception that I guess I'm a little more strict in chartering. I'm also looking for the things that you won't do. I don't believe the ad hoc committee will pick up public engagement on the STIP, because we have administrative process to go ahead and do that and ways to do that. So there are some things that we have administrative processes for. We as committee may get into them and say we need to tweak them, whatever, but I don't think the ad hoc committee needs to get into STIPs and other material that we do as normal course of business. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, again, I don't think administrative actions on part of the city are part of what the ad hoc committee has scope of.
Councilmember Ross.
So I like the 6:15 time slot right before. It gives people a chance to come and talk with us about items that might be on the agenda. And like you said, they may not be able to get it all out in 3 minutes. And sometimes, people may not feel comfortable standing up there and talking about it, but at least they can come to us and talk with us about it, or anything else that's on their mind. So if it's once a month or twice a month, it's fine. I'm here that time anyway.
Others? So how would, if we proceed, how do you want to proceed? I mean, maybe we can just say the first meeting in July, we'll be here at 6:15 and somehow get that communicated to the public.
When's the ad hoc committee meet next?
Whenever we decide to meet next.
would you want to meet with Joan in that meeting and discuss about
No, that'd be good.
getting
Yeah.
communication?
No, Jody can take care of noticing that. You guys just need to make a motion or a decision and let us know, and she'll get it notified in the agenda.
I think it's just come on us to figure out when we can meet, to keep discussing, and over lunch with a good view is always a good option, but,
So we'll meet within a week or so to.
definitely before the next council meeting.
Yeah, right.
I guess I was responding specifically to the idea of first meeting of every month or first meeting of July, at least to kick it off.
Peace, I guess I'm suggesting, similar to what you did for the last town hall meeting, where you had the sandwich signs out saying, hey, we're having a meeting over here.
I got
That
you.
might be good for, this is something more than usual agenda, and tell you the truth.
Okay.
Most of our agendas for the general public are snore fests. So they're not gonna, we're not gonna get a response. So we may
No.
need something just other than notifying the council agenda.
That makes sense.
We'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And then one more item, if I may. We'd even talked about the third town hall meeting. Let's have it in September. Let's have it at the new high school as a location, which is a downtown location, which we haven't done yet. And let's, the suggested topic, if we do a topic, would be perhaps Snoqualmie 2050. In other words, what do you want it to look like 30 years from now? Because 30 years from now in the past, we got to where we are now, and what do you want the next 30 years? Because the next, is the committee points out to me, the next 30 years is coming up pretty soon.
And do we want to start activities on the designing that meeting?
No, not now.
Okay, September comes pretty quick. You'll
Yeah,
find
that's
it
right.
amazing.
Do you want the staff to do a doodle poll to find a date, or do we just give it to Matt to pick the date that works for him? And make it look nice?
I guarantee you'll pick one.
I think what would be nice, Mr. Mayor, is if staff could put some preliminary feelers out with the school district. I know that building will have been open 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if they have a way to schedule a meeting. So I think that would be
Jody can-
helpful.
Jody
Take
can
care
look
of
at
it.
Okay. I mean, they may say, hey, you know, we won't take any public meetings through September because we just got to get it. So, okay, fine. But, so knowing that, how that's going to work with the new high school, I think it's a fantastic setting to have it. Yeah.
If I might suggest, if you're talking about dates, Septembers are often have quite a high sports category on Sundays and Saturdays. It also would be, maybe since we've done a Saturday and we've done a Sunday, now it's time for a weekday. Something after work where adults who are working can stop by on the way home, have some light appetizers of some sort to take care of that aspect of it, and look for a weekday that makes sense, so.
Are you thinking 6 o'clock, 5:30, 7?
I think
Say after
6
work.
would be the earliest, I would say, as a working parent.
I was just clarifying because it made it sound like they'd stop there, eat some light appetizers before going home for dinner. You thinking they go home, get dinner, then come to the meeting?
I don't have the brain power right now to analyze that one. I'll
Which is
leave it
usually
to
why
you.
7 o'clock usually
But-
gives people time to.
Yeah, something that we can get participation at.
Yeah, okay.
That's really what it comes down
Just
to.
wanted to give Jody a little more direction. Okay. Councilmember Mayhew.
So, I just wasn't clear, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but did we, are we agreed that we're going to have this informal meeting with council members mingling with public at 6:15 of the first meeting in July? Do we need a motion, or are we, is there anyone that disagrees with that or thinks we ought to vote for that, or can it just be taken that that's agreed to?
Are there any objections to that?
Well, it's not binding per
It's
se.
voluntary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not,
So-
it's-
Yeah.
anyone objecting to us just proceeding?
Or just thumbs up if you.
Thumbs up,
if
thumbs
like-
down. What do you got?
And he said 6:30. We already think 6:15.
Yeah.
I meant 6:15,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
sorry.
Can't make 6:30, you show up 6:30.
I mean, pending
But
any
we're
other
good.
things that get in the way, I'll be here every chance I
Right.
get.
So we've got the, to go forward on that, and then I just wanted to add to Councilmember Jean's, this idea of Snoqualmie 2050, if you think about it, we talk a lot about things that people want to see, and something in Snoqualmie, and something comes up, and people say, well, I'm against that, or people say, I'm for that, or why don't we do more over here, or why don't we do less over here? These conversations that I've experienced over the last year and a half here on council seem to be in the moment for a decision that's being made almost right away. Okay, and that's important, those decisions have to be made, but one of the thoughts that's been going through my mind over and over is, let's look out a ways. We're coming to the end. I've heard everyone in this room say, well, we're coming to the end of the Ridge build-out. We're kind of coming to the end of a big thing that we've been doing for a long time. And the thought that jumps in my head is, yeah, and what's next? It's not a time to it is a time to look at what's accomplished, but it's a time to say, by the way, what's next? Let's not just drift into things. Let's be intentional. Let's tell the developers, here's what we would be willing to consider, and here's what we're not interested in hearing. Let's try and shape the future, and let's get citizens involved in shaping that future, not individual project by individual project, but let's set a vision for the next 30 years, just like they did 30 years ago when they decided to do the Ridge, right? Just 30 years ago is when all that planning started.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to sort of expand on what Councilmember Jean says. That's the kind of idea, and I think that's a pretty exciting topic.
Councilmember Ross?
Well, I think it should tie into the PSRC 2050 vision that they have right now, because we know that there's 1.8 million people moving to Seattle area by that time. So we're going to get some of that population. So what does it look like, and how many people do we expect by then?
Well, in the
I do want to
PSRC.
clarify that it's not, sometimes the misperception is that population growth is a bunch of people moving here. About 40% of that growth is usually our kids growing up and needing places to live, you hope.
Just as part of their PSRC's 2050, they've now said how many they think are going to come to Snoqualmie. And I think our community's going to be very interested to learn that number. I think it's going to be a very interesting meeting in September
Right.
when people discover what PSRC thinks is going to happen to us over 30 years, because they don't think, I'll give you a preview, they got a number in mind, and it isn't zero growth.
Right.
Yeah, tell us what it is.
In September, we got to tease them out.
It's their numbers, not one we gave.
Yeah, it's not our number. It's not our number, their number.
Councilmember Jean.
And yet, in saying all that, that doesn't presuppose that we are destined as the council, that we got to find something to build. We got to find something to expand. We're receptive to the city saying, we're done. No more entry fee.
Well, entry fee, but no more. All right. Any other discussion on that item? You guys, you still wanted to pick up the shoreline plan for further discussion, too.
I think we left it off at Sean's question.
Councilor
was what?
Sunwell.
I don't remember.
Councilor
So-
Sunwell, did you want to, you picking up on shoreline, or you want last comments on this last item?
I'm just going to posit a question. I can go either way on this, but given that we've been here since 6 o'clock, I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but we've waited since 1997 or whatever, right? I'm just wondering how productive a conversation about the shoreline plan will be 3.5 hours into a meeting. We've already seen Matt degrade quite a bit just throughout the meeting, and admittedly, so I'm just a thought.
Councilmember Holloway?
Well, if Councilmember Mayhew will entertain, could we, because you're right, that is 68 pages that we really ought to go through. Could we just basically take the homework assignment to go through that, and at the next council meeting, come back with, and I'll say bulleted points of, I'd change this, I'd insert this, and we can have a discussion at that level to go through.
I think that's a great idea, and Mayor, city staff can help us with accumulating that? So if we sort of sent our observations, comments, is that something that city staff could compile for us?
Yes, absolutely.
Hurry before Bob gets back in.
So if that would be the request from community development, for us to be able to kind of help guide this through. Please, everyone, get all of the comments that you want to see get discussed. Let's have staff compile that for us, and then we'll try and get through. If there may be a lot of that we can get through, and then we can come back to council with those things that remain for us to talk about and try and make us as productive as we can be and get through this as quickly as we can, realizing this June 30 deadline that, we're going to go past probably, but
Which
we don't want
June 30 was it?
Yeah, we don't want to go, we want to minimize how far past we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Holloway.
So follow-up question, though. Follow-up question, when I want to add chicken coops to the shoreline master plan, how are you guys going to tell me no?
No, we're going to compile it all, and we're
Yeah.
going to, and it's, if the city council, if the administration says, great idea, and the council says, great idea, we'll bring it back to you redlined, and coops will be in there. On the other hand, if it's something where staff or the committee says that not too sure about that, then that'll come back to you in a form of, here's something the council needs to discuss further.
And then they can say no.
Okay, but so the process you're recommending is that staff help us collect the issues, they then go to CDC.
Yeah.
CDC comes back next council with, here's the list of issues we had, here's the ones we propose to move forward on, here's the ones we propose not to move forward on.
Right.
Okay, I'm
This
just
was,
looking for that
this was not
disposition.
dissimilar from how we handled Salish, right? So we all dug in, we had this matrix or whatever you call it, this list of stuff that each individual council member had questions on, and we just kind of picked them off one by one, except most of that's going to happen at the committee level rather than
Right.
the general council level, at least the nitty-gritty stuff.
Councilmember Lasay.
But we want all council members to contribute to that list. It's just not done at council, it's done at committee.
Yeah.
And
So
then brought back
please,
to council.
And brought back to council then with the full list, we're not going to pick and choose. It's going to be the full list, but there'll be recommendations on which ones we think are recommended council. Maybe council decides to pick a few that weren't on the recommended CDC list for whatever reason, and maybe there's a few that were recommended that are kicked down the road.
If I can convince four of you that chicken coops are a good thing, I can make the argument at council and get it moved to the yes list versus no list.
The poop is bad.
But it's compostable.
Councilmember May.
So the deal we're making with each other is, we're going to do our homework and get that stuff in on the list. We're not going to be bringing up enormous numbers of new things because we didn't get around to our homework. So let's
So do
commit
we have
each
to
other.
do that now until before the CDC committee meeting?
It'd be nice if we could get it done over the next week, yeah.
Yeah, before the weekend.
Or we move
by
to
the end of the
extend the
week.
meeting.
Oh, yeah,
We could do that.
because you just compile it.
We always do that.
Okay.
And we send that to you?
Tell you what, copy me and Mr. Rogers.
Aye. And CC Mark Hoffman.
And Mr. Hoffman. 3.
All right. Okay, with that, as you can see, staff reports are written at the first meeting of the month, but at this time, is there any other questions from the staff? All right, with that, any announcements before we conclude tonight? Okay, there being no further business coming for the council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
I responded to that.